You know my name, but you do not know me.
That is just, it is a hell of a way to start a story, isn't
And
it?
it really is. It feels less like an opening line and more like a challenge just being thrown down from across the centuries.
Absolutely. It is a confrontation.
Yeah.
It is the literary equivalent of a character reaching right out of the page, grabbing you by the collar, and telling you to sit down and shut up and listen.
And it continues right after that. The text says, "You have tried to parse the tones of my skin and sift through the crimson rubies of my blood, but my roots lie deep beneath the dirt and soil of every woman who has drawn breath."
Which just gives you a legitimate shiver down the spine.
Yeah, it does. Because we are, of course, talking about perhaps the single most famous woman in human history, or at least the image of her.
The image is definitely the key word there. Because when you hear the name Cleopatra, be honest with me and, with our listener right now, what is the very first thing that pops into your head?
Oh, I mean, it is completely unavoidable. It is the classics. I see Elizabeth Taylor in that heavy blue eyeshadow.
All right, the Golden Barge.
The golden barge, the seductress rolled up in a carpet, popping out to surprise Julius Caesar. I see the tragic lover dying with a snake at her breast. It is the horror of the Nile brand, right? That is the brand we all know.
Exactly. We have these snapshots, these pop culture caricatures, really, that have been reinforced by Shakespeare and by Hollywood and art history for centuries. But today, we are taking a deep dive into a source that just takes a absolute sledgehammer to all of that.
Yes, we are. We are looking at Cleopatra, the novel by Saara El-Arifi.
And I think the very first thing we need to tell you as you listen is that if you were expecting a dry recitation of dates and battles or, a romance novel with toga ripping, you are in the wrong place.
Oh, absolutely not. No, this book is something else entirely. It is a vivid and brutal and, frankly, magical reimagining of her life.
And when we say magical, we do not mean magical like, oh, the sunset was magical.
No. We mean literal, tangible magic. But I think before we get into the fantasy elements and the magic system, we should establish what the mission of this deep dive really is. Like, why rewrite Cleopatra again?
The mission is reclamation, pure and simple. In the author's note, El-Arifi makes this profound distinction that really frames how we should read the entire text. She says, this novel is not history, it is memory.
Memory.
Yeah, and she talks about how history is often a disease.
That specific phrase stuck with me so much. History is a disease. That is a really heavy concept to unpack.
It is heavy, but think about it practically. History is a narrative usually written by the victors to serve a very specific political agenda. In Cleopatra's case, the history we know, the history that survived, was largely written by the Romans, specifically by Octavian.
Who later became Augustus Caesar.
Exactly. He was her mortal enemy. He literally wrote the history books on her while she was still alive to discredit her. He needed to paint her as this foreign witch and a whore so that the Roman people wouldn't hate him for destroying her.
Which is terrifying when you stop and think about it. Imagine your worst enemy, the person who hates you most in the entire world, gets to write your biography.
And that biography becomes the only record that survives for 2,000 years.
So this book attempts to bypass the Roman historians like Plutarch and Dio. It tries to listen to that voice in the dust from the prologue. It presents Cleopatra not as a villain, but as a scholar, a mother, and a ruler fighting against complete erasure.
And to do that, El-Arifi does something very risky, but incredibly interesting. She adds this layer of high fantasy to the actual historical timeline.
Right, so let us unpack this fantasy engine under the hood, because usually when you read historical fiction about famous figures, you expect strict realism, right? You want historical accuracy. But here, the Ptolemaic dynasty, which is Cleopatra's family, they aren't just political rulers. They are depicted as a bloodline that is physically bound to the Egyptian gods.
It reimagines the divinity of the pharaohs. In real history, pharaohs claimed to be gods on earth to justify their rule to the populace. It was propaganda. But in this book, that isn't a metaphor. It is a biological fact.
A literal magic system based on blood.
Yes, and it all stems from the founder of the dynasty, Ptolemy Soter.
The savior.
Right. Soter was originally a general for Alexander the Great, and when Alexander died, his generals carved up the known world and Soter got Egypt. But in the novel's lore, Soter did something incredibly drastic to ensure his family would keep power forever. He didn't just conquer Egypt with armies, he hacked its spiritual system.
Hacked the system is such a great way to put it. The book describes how he used the Book of the Dead, which is a real ancient text of spells for the afterlife, but he used it in a way it was never intended to be used.
He bound the Egyptian gods to his bloodline. It wasn't a prayer or a request for blessing, it was a binding ritual. A trap, basically. He forced the gods to lend their physical power to his descendants.
And the result of this binding is that every Ptolemy gets a specific gift from a specific god. And some of these are incredibly cool, and some are just profoundly disturbing. We learn that Sauter himself had super speed and strength.
Which is a brilliant way the book explains the impossible architecture of Alexandria. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the ancient wonders of the world. In this version, Sutter didn't just commission it and pay laborers. He helped build it with godlike speed.
Same with the Library of Alexandria. It literalizes his historical achievements into magical feats.
Then you have Berenice, who is Cleopatra's older sister. She had the mark of a snake on her calf. Her power was tied directly to the harvest.
Right, so when Berenice was happy and healthy, the Nile flooded perfectly, the crops thrived, Egypt was fed.
Which is the ultimate power for a ruler, really. If you control the food supply, you completely control the people.
But then, oh man, then we get to the brother, Ptolemy the 13th, or Theos, as he's called.
Theos, yes.
This kid gave me the actual creeps. He has a power that feels straight out of a horror movie.
It is deeply unsettling. He can breathe underwater.
Which sounds like a superhero power, like Aquaman or something, but the way it is written is so eerie and disturbing. He is just a child, but he can sit at the bottom of the palace pool for hours just watching people walk by through the water.
It really emphasizes his complete detachment from humanity. He is a creature of the deep. But connected to that water affinity is an even darker gift. Prophecy.
But a very specific kind of prophecy.
Yes, specifically the ability to predict death.
Yeah, that is a rough one for family dinner conversations.
He can look at a person and know exactly when their thread will be cut. It sets up this incredible tension in the family because these powers are the absolute proof of their right to rule. In this world, you do not rule because you have the best army or the most money. You rule because the gods literally marked you. If you have the power, you are the pharaoh.
Which brings us directly to Cleopatra. She is the protagonist. She is brilliant. She is 18 years old. She has the mark of Isis, the symbol of the throne, tattooed by the gods on her neck. But nothing happens.
That is her central internal conflict at the start of the book. She describes herself as chosen by Isis, but not yet gifted with her power. She looks at her little brother, this creepy kid who can breathe water and see the future, and she feels completely inadequate.
She feels like a fraud. It is classic imposter syndrome, but with actual divine stakes. She is sitting on the throne, but she feels she lacks the battery pack that makes a pharaoh a real pharaoh.
And this insecurity is what drives her entirely. She overcompensates. She studies relentlessly. She learns multiple languages, architecture, mathematics, astronomy. She becomes a sponge for knowledge because she thinks, if I don't have magic, I have to be the absolute smartest person in every room just to survive my family.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. She does have a power. She just doesn't recognize it as magic because it looks like work.
Exactly. Her power is healing. Her power is chemistry. Her power is architecture.
She can suture wounds with this impossible precision. She can brew poisons and antidotes that literally no one else understands. She can look at a building and understand the structural loads instinctively.
But because she had to read books and experiment to refine these skills, she dismisses them. She calls it academic skill. She thinks, I learned this in the Library of Alexandria, so it can't be a gift from the gods. Gifts are supposed to be free.
Which is such a fascinating take on how we view talent. We often devalue the things we work really hard for, thinking that true talent should just flow out of us effortlessly. But El-Arifi is saying that her intellect and her drive is the divine spark.
And this connects so beautifully to the historical reality. We know from Arab sources, historians like al-Masudi, whom El-Arifi references heavily in her research, that the real Cleopatra was a highly renowned scholar. In the West, we remember her as a seductress. But in the East, she was remembered as a scientist.
She wrote books on cosmetics, on medicine, on weights and measures.
Exactly. El-Arifi takes that historical fact that she was a huge nerd, basically, and turns it into her divine gift in this fantasy setting.
I love that so much. It validates her intelligence as her true superpower. But let us talk about the environment she is stuck in, because being smart in the Ptolemy family is just a baseline survival requirement. The family dynamics in this book are, well, toxic doesn't quite cover it.
Not at all.
It is Succession meets Game of Thrones in ancient Egypt, but with way more fratricide.
She calls them the beasts of Egypt, and it is a very apt description. The father, Elais, is depicted as this indulgent flute-playing king who just loves throwing festivals. He seems almost buffoonish and harmless at first glance.
But then you peel back the layer and realize he's the man who murdered his own daughter, Berenice.
That scene is a flashback, but it hangs over the whole book. Berenice was the perfect heir with the harvest magic, and the father kills her.
Why does he do it?
To secure his own throne, he felt threatened. It teaches Cleopatra a very hard, traumatic lesson early on. We are Egypt, and Egypt is us. Meaning the individual life does not matter. Even your own child's life doesn't matter. Only the survival of the dynasty matters.
It is a complete mafia mentality. And then there is Arsinoe, the other
It's a
sister.
rebel. Arsinoe is such a tragic figure here. She is the younger sister, constantly overshadowed by Cleopatra and the brother. She has no mark, no obvious power, and she just curdles with resentment over the years. She becomes the primary antagonist within the family, eventually siding with the brother against Cleopatra.
There's this key scene early on that I think perfectly sets up Cleopatra's personality against this whole backdrop of family treachery. It is the game of Senate she plays on the lighthouse balcony with Charmian.
Yes, Charmian. We definitely need to mention her. She is Cleopatra's handmaiden, but really she is her sister in everything but blood. She's the only person in the world Cleopatra actually trusts.
So they are playing Senate, which is this ancient Egyptian board game, kind of like backgammon meets Chutes and Ladders. And Cleopatra is losing badly. The odds of her winning are mathematically impossible based on the board. Charmian basically tells her, just give it up. You lost the game.
Charmian says you cannot deny the inevitable. And it is clearly a metaphor for their political situation at that moment. The Romans are encroaching, the brother is plotting a coup, the famine is coming. Give up.
And Cleopatra just refuses. She physically knocks the pieces off the board rather than concede defeat. But then she re-rolls the throwing sticks. And by sheer luck, or maybe fate, they land in a perfect winning position.
And she delivers that defining line. A Ptolemy never loses. It epitomizes her complete refusal to accept reality when reality doesn't suit her ambitions. Even when the Romans are at the gates, even when she is exiled in the desert, she refuses to accept that she has lost. She will flip the entire board if she has to.
Speaking of flipping the board, we have to get to the moment everyone thinks they know. The carpet scene. The famous meeting with Julius Caesar.
The most famous meet-cute in human history.
Right. In the movie, it is glamorous. She rolls out of a gorgeous rug. Her hair is perfect. Caesar's instantly smitten. Cue the romantic sweeping score. But in this book, it is gritty. It is desperate.
It has to be desperate. Context is everything here. At this point in the story, Cleopatra has been exiled. Her brother and the eunuch Pothinus, who is just an absolute snake in human form, has kicked her out of Alexandria. She's living in the harsh desert. She desperately needs to get back into the palace to meet Caesar before her brother poisons his mind against her.
So she doesn't use a carpet as a sexy prop. She uses a carpet weaver, a man named Apollodorus, as a cover for a covert military infiltration.
Right. She disguises herself as his lowly apprentice. She sneaks into the heavily guarded palace through secret tiles and ancient drainage passages. And this is where her magic, her intellect, comes in. She knows the architecture of the palace better than anyone alive because she studied the original blueprints. She knows the hidden veins of the building.
So she is crawling through actual filth, climbing through air vents. When she finally drops into Caesar's room, she isn't naked or dripping in gold jewelry. She is covered in dirt. She is exhausted. She literally smells like the sewers.
She says in the narration, I have read accounts that I walked into Caesar's room clad in nothing but a necklace. But it was far simpler than that. It wasn't a seduction scene. It was a business transaction.
Exactly. She basically stands up, dusts the grime off herself, looks the most powerful man in the world in the eye, and says, look, Caesar, you have massive debts. Rome is broke. I have all the money in Egypt, but I need my crown back. Let us make a deal.
This is so crucial to El-Arifi's recharacterization of her. The relationship with Caesar isn't portrayed primarily as a romance, certainly not at first. It is a meeting of intellectual equals.
They bond over city planning, which sounds so dry, but in the context of the book, it is electric. They are nerding out over the Library of Alexandria, over astronomy, over the logistics of how to organize a civilization.
Caesar is described as a warrior first, dictator second, father third. He is a hard, pragmatic man. He doesn't fall for her because she is pretty. He falls for her because she is the only person in the room who can keep up with him intellectually. She is a statesman on his level.
And that mutual respect is exactly what threatens her enemies so much. This is where the whore label actually comes from in the book. It is not because she is actually sleeping around with everyone. It is a calculated political weapon deployed by Pothinus.
Pothinus is the king's advisor, and he sees that he cannot beat Cleopatra in a debate. He can't outsmart her, and he can't outgovern her, so he attacks her virtue. He starts the rumor that she is sleeping her way to the top to discredit her authority with the people. It is the oldest, cheapest trick in the book.
And the novel points out that this tactic worked so incredibly well it lasted for 2,000 years. There is a section where the characters discuss the infamous libido letters.
Yes, these forged documents that circulated widely in Rome, claiming she had these insatiable, monstrous sexual appetites. The expert analysis in the book and the author herself in the historical notes points out that these were likely created by Roman writers to sell a narrative. If a woman is powerful, the Roman logic went, she must be using sex to get it. She couldn't possibly just be smarter than the men.
It is the classic double standard. If a man conquers a nation, he is a tactical genius. If a woman does it, she is a seductress using black magic.
Precisely. And in the novel, her sexuality is actually quite guarded. She is not flitting from bed to bed at all. She is Caesar's wife in all but Roman law.
But their relationship does produce a child. Caesarion, the lion. And this is a massive pivot point for her character, because up until now, Cleopatra has been the underdog, the scholar, the young woman fighting for her birthright. But when she becomes a mother, something fundamental shifts inside her.
It is the shift from innocent ruler to ruthless matriarch. Motherhood changes the stakes entirely for her. She isn't just fighting for her own survival anymore. She is fighting for the legacy of the entire world.
There's a scene that genuinely shocked me. It is the incident with the soothsayer.
This is a very pivotal moment for the reader's relationship with Cleopatra. A soothsayer comes to the palace to predict the newborn child's future.
And usually in these stories, the prophecy is vague and glowing, right? Like, he will be a great king, he will conquer lands. But this soothsayer looks at the baby and predicts that the child is cursed, that he will be the end of the Ptolemaic line.
Now, a normal person might panic, or maybe pay the soothsayer to leave and keep quiet. But Cleopatra instantly realizes the political danger. If word gets out into the city that the heir to Rome and Egypt is cursed by the gods, his life is over. His legitimacy is gone before he can even walk.
So what does she do? She has the soothsayer executed immediately. No trial, no hesitation.
It is cold, it is bloody, and it is completely necessary in her mind.
But then it gets even worse. Later, she needs to test a poison or a medicine. She is working on her chemistry to protect her family. And she uses a human test subject.
Khufu, the stable boy.
This part, I actually had to put the book down for a second. She takes this innocent kid, a boy she knows, a boy who trusts her, and she poisons him just to see if her new antidote works. And it doesn't. He dies in absolute agony.
And she just watches it happen. She analytically records the results of the failure.
How are we supposed to root for her after that? That makes her a monster.
It does make her a monster. And I think El-Arifi desperately wants you to sit with that discomfort. She isn't writing a modern girl boss who does no wrong and always takes the moral high ground. She is writing a Ptolemy. She's writing a beast of Egypt. Cleopatra justifies it to herself by saying, I was a queen who was a mother. She believes that to protect her son from a world that wants him dead, she has to become a monster herself. She completely sacrifices her own morality on the altar of her son's survival.
It strips away the romanticism completely. She isn't just a tragic victim of Rome. She is a killer when she needs to be.
It complicates her beautifully. And frankly, it puts her on the exact same moral level as the men she is fighting. Caesar killed tens of thousands in Gaul. Octavian killed thousands in the civil wars, starved whole cities. Cleopatra kills one stable boy, and we as modern readers are horrified. It forces us to examine our own biases about what kind of violence we accept from male leaders versus female leaders.
That is a really fair point. It is uncomfortable, but it is fair. But sadly, even that extreme ruthlessness isn't enough to save her perfect plan, because Caesar, well, we all know what happens to Caesar, the Ides of March.
The assassination completely shatters her political position. She's actually living in Rome when it happens. She has to flee back to Egypt with her son in the dead of night, and suddenly she is alone again. The great alliance is broken.
Which brings us to the other man, the second act of her life, Mark Antony.
The contrast here is fascinating to explore. If Caesar was the head, cool, calculating, highly intellectual, Antony is the heart. He is all emotion, all excess, all passion.
And he is kind of a mess, isn't he?
Oh, he is a glorious mess. He is a heavy drinker, a brawler, a soldier. He isn't a long-term planner like Caesar was.
Their meeting in Tarsus is legendary, and the book really leans into the theatrics of it. She knows she needs a new Roman ally to protect Egypt, so she sails up the river on the golden barge, dressed as Aphrodite.
Or Isis. She intentionally blends the Greek and Egyptian iconography. But again, look at the power dynamic in this scene. Antony summoned her. He demanded she come to answer trumped-up charges of aiding his political enemies. He wanted to fine her, to levy a tax, to fund his armies.
And she basically just laughs in his face. She hosts a banquet so incredibly lavish that he feels poor and uncultured by comparison. She completely refuses to play the role of the submissive supplicant. She dazzles him into submission.
She flips the script entirely. But what I love about their dynamic in the book is that once the theatricality and the posturing drops, they were surprisingly playful with each other.
Yes, the fishing wager. This was such a great humanizing scene in the middle of all this heavy politics.
It really is a breath of fresh air.
So they are arguing, as they often do, about which city is better, Rome or Alexandria. Antony is Team Rome, obviously. Cleopatra is Team Alexandria. And they decide to settle this massive cultural debate by seeing who can catch the most fish in the harbor like a couple of kids.
A very simple, silly contest.
But Antony cheats. He is the great Roman general, and his ego cannot stand losing to a woman. So he secretly has his divers swim underneath the boat and physically put live fish on his hook so he looks like a master fisherman.
It is so incredibly petty.
It is. And Cleopatra catches him immediately. She knows exactly what he's doing. So she has her own diver swim down and put a salted, dried fish, like a preserved smoked herring, on his hook. When he pulls it up expecting a live catch, everyone on the boat just erupts laughing.
It breaks all the tension. It shows that beneath the heavy crowns and the Roman armor and their massive god complexes, they are just two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. They can laugh at each other's flaws.
But there's also a deep mystical layer to their pairing. We talked about the divine bloodline earlier. The book posits that they are the literal avatars of Isis and Dionysus on Earth.
Yes. Antony is heavily associated with Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, madness, and ecstasy. And Cleopatra is Isis, the mother, the healer, the magician. When they are together, it is not just a political alliance. It is a collision of divine forces.
There is a beautiful, quiet moment where Antony recognizes her not as the terrifying queen of Egypt, but as Selene.
Selene is the fake name she uses when she goes undercover in the lower city to work as a healer. It represents her humanity, her stripped-down, unburdened self. Caesar loved her mind and her crown. Antony loves her. He loves the woman who smells like milk and medicinal herbs, not just the queen who smells like heavy incense.
Which makes the eventual betrayal hurt so much more, because he does betray her.
He marries Octavia, Octavian's sister.
Politics ruining everything again.
It is pure realpolitik. Rome is on the absolute brink of another devastating civil war between Antony and Octavian. To keep the peace and buy time, Antony agrees to marry his rival sister. It is strictly a political alliance to appease the Roman Senate.
But for Cleopatra, who is sitting alone in Alexandria raising their newborn twins, it is a knife straight to the heart.
She is devastated. But true to form, she's pragmatic. She quotes that brutal line, "Bind yourself to your enemies." She understands why he had to do it strategically, even if it breaks her emotionally. She knows that sometimes you have to swallow poison to survive the day.
But he comes back. He always comes back to her. And when he does, they go all in. The donations of Alexandria, this is the moment where they basically stand up and say, to hell with Rome.
They cross the Rubicon, metaphorically speaking. They hold a massive public ceremony in Alexandria. They sit on huge golden thrones. And they arrogantly divide up the entire Eastern world among their young children. They declare Caesarion the king of kings. They are openly, brazenly challenging Rome's ultimate authority.
They are basically broadcasting, we are the new world order. Rome is the past, Alexandria is the future. And Rome, specifically Octavian, absolutely does not like that.
Octavian is the true architect of her downfall. But he doesn't just use armies and ships. He uses words.
This brings us to a part of the book that felt so eerily relevant to today. It is about narrative warfare, fake news.
It is ancient propaganda at its absolute finest.
There is this scene that is just heartbreaking to read. Cleopatra, disguised again, goes into the bustling marketplace in Alexandria. She wants to hear what her own people are saying about the impending war.
She expects, or at least hopes, to hear patriotic support. Or maybe stories about the glory of Egypt standing up to the oppressors.
Instead, she sees a Hakawati, a traditional street storyteller, telling the story of her. But it is the Roman version of her life.
The storyteller is loudly recounting these graphic tales of the Whore Queen. He tells the crowd she is poisoning good men, that she is a literal monster, that she has enslaved the great Mark Antony with dark witchcraft. And the crowd, her own people that she has fought to protect, they are eating it up. They are cheering for her downfall.
Imagine standing there, in your own city, surrounded by the citizens you are trying to feed and protect from invasion, and hearing them cheer for a version of you that is a grotesque, manufactured lie.
It is the exact moment she realizes that she has already lost the war. It connects perfectly back to the theme we discussed earlier, history as a disease. She realizes that the war isn't just happening on the physical battlefield at sea, it is happening in the minds of the people. Octavian is winning because he controls the story.
He didn't have the internet or social media, but he had the Hakawati. He had the poets, he had the faces on the coins.
And she is completely powerless to stop it. As El-Arifi writes, history is written by the victors. Octavian is systematically dismantling her reputation before he even lands a single ship on Egyptian shores. He makes her a monster so that when he inevitably kills her, he will be celebrated as a hero saving the world.
Which leads us directly to Actium, the big, decisive naval battle. History often frames this event as Cleopatra fleeing the battle like a coward, and Antony blindly following her because he was, well, entirely controlled by her.
That is the Roman narrative. The love-struck, foolish general and the cowardly, treacherous foreign woman.
But the book frames it entirely differently. It makes it a tactical choice.
It presents her retreat not as a panic attack, but as a cold calculation. She's standing on the deck of her flagship. She sees the battle turning against them. She realizes that if she stays and fights to the last ship, the entire Egyptian fleet will be destroyed right there, and Egypt will be completely defenseless against the coming land invasion.
So she makes a terrible choice. She says, sometimes we must sacrifice what we hold dear. She willingly sacrifices her own reputation as a brave warrior to save her country's last line of defense.
It is a strategic withdrawal to fight another day. She saves the fleet to defend Alexandria, but of course the optics are terrible. To the men fighting and dying, it looks like she just ran away. And Antony sees her leaving, and his heart overrides his military head. He abandons his men and follows her.
And that is the end of the war, really. Their forces completely collapse after that.
The fall comes very fast after Actium. They are trapped back in Alexandria. The Roman legions are closing in. Antony dies in her arms.
It is the tragic end of the Dionysus and Isis era, but the book doesn't end with his death. It focuses intensely on her final choice.
The suicide. And here we really have to do some historical debunking for you listening.
Please, we have to talk about the asp. The basket of figs.
It makes for a visually stunning painting, sure. But biologically, medically, it is complete nonsense. An Egyptian cobra is massive. You cannot simply hide an angry cobra in a small basket of snack figs. And a cobra bite is messy, incredibly painful, and slow. It causes severe necrosis, vomiting, paralysis. It is not a peaceful, glamorous way to go out.
In the book, El-Arifi leans back into Cleopatra's established skills as a master chemist. She has a highly refined poison tincture prepared well in advance. She knows exactly what to brew to ensure a painless, rapid death.
The cobras in the room are purely symbolic. They represent the uraeus, the protective cobra on the pharaoh's crown. They represent her returning to her divinity. But the actual weapon is her own science.
Her motivation here is the key to her entire character arc. It is an act of supreme agency. She has seen her younger sister Arsinoe paraded in heavy chains through Rome years earlier. She knows exactly what Octavian plans to do with her.
He wants to lead her like a captured prize animal in his triumph. He wants to chain the Queen of Kings to a chariot and drag her through the dirty streets of Rome so the mob can throw garbage and spit on her.
And she says, I will not be led in triumph. She absolutely refuses to give him that satisfaction. She chooses the time and the manner of her own exit. She denies him his ultimate victory.
But here's the massive twist, and this is where the book goes from a great historical fiction to something almost metaphysical and horrifying. This is the part that really blew my mind.
Me too. So she drinks the poison. She dies.
Or she thinks she does.
Right. She wakes up in this endless red landscape. The Duat, the Egyptian afterlife.
She expects to see the field of reeds, paradise. She expects to be finally reunited with Antony and all her royal ancestors in peace.
She meets Isis, the goddess she has served and represented all her life. The goddess whose literal mark is burned into her neck.
And Isis denies her entry.
Why, though? She did everything right. She was the perfect vessel for Egypt.
Because of Siptr.
Yeah.
Remember the very beginning of our deep dive. Ptolemy Siptr bound the gods to his bloodline to ensure they would rule forever. He cheated the natural cosmic order. He hacked the system.
And there is always a price.
There is always a steep price for magic. The price is that the last Ptolemy, which is Cleopatra, can never truly die.
This gave me genuine chills. She isn't granted immortality in the sense that she gets to walk around the earth forever. It is a curse of memory.
Exactly. Isis tells her that because her family arrogantly sought to live forever in history, she is cursed to live forever in the minds of men. She is cursed to be constantly reinterpreted, misremembered, and judged by people who never knew her. played by actresses in polyester and plastic, as the book specifically says.
That line, polyester and plastic, that stopped me completely cold. Because she is in the ancient afterlife, but she is seeing horrific visions of our modern future. She sees the cheap spirit Halloween costumes, she sees the bad Hollywood movies, she sees the Shakespeare plays turning her into a caricature.
She sees herself becoming a cheap commodity, a myth. The Cleopatra of history overtakes the real flesh and blood woman. The curse is that she can never rest. She is always being dragged back onto the stage to perform for our entertainment.
So the prologue, that line, "You know my name, but you do not know me," that is the ghost of Cleopatra speaking to us right now.
Yes. She is haunting the narrative itself. She is trapped in the false story we all keep telling. Every single time we tell the slutty queen version or the tragic helpless lover version, we are extending her curse. We are the ones actively keeping her out of the field of reeds.
That is just profound and honestly horrifying. It reframes the whole book. It is not just a story about her life, it is a story about how we consume her life. It is a direct accusation aimed at the reader.
It is an accusation. It asks you, the listener, are you consuming her real tragedy just for light entertainment? Are you part of the ignorant crowd cheering for the Hakawati's lies in the marketplace?
But the book does end with a powerful reclamation. She says, "I am abundant."
You will never define me. That is her final, desperate act of rebellion. Even if we keep telling the wrong story century after century, she knows who she actually was. She holds on to her own truth in the darkness of the afterlife.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening?
I think it is a massive call to critical thinking. When we consume history, especially the history of marginalized groups or conquered peoples or powerful women, we need to stop and ask, who is holding the pen? Who is the storyteller benefiting from this narrative?
Like El-Arifi says, never trust the story, only the storyteller.
Exactly. And it is a reminder that these historical figures were real, breathing people. Cleopatra was a terrified mother who held her children while Rome burned her world down. She was a brilliant scholar who looked at the stars and understood mathematics. She wasn't just a sexy Halloween costume.
I will tell you one thing. I will never look at a Cleopatra costume the same way again. It feels deeply disrespectful now, like I am part of the curse keeping her trapped.
It does make you feel incredibly complicit, doesn't it?
It really does.
But maybe, just maybe, by reading books like El-Arifi's, by actively trying to find the real voice in the dust, we are helping to break that curse a little bit. Or at least, we're quieting the historical noise so the real woman can whisper for a moment.
That is a beautiful thought. We're trying to set the record straight by looking at all the angles.
Or at least we are finally admitting that the record we've been handed is completely broken.
So here is the provocative question we want to leave you with today. It is a bit of a brain burner based on everything we've just discussed. If Cleopatra is truly cursed to exist as a ghost as long as we keep telling her story, are we, by discussing her today on this very deep dive, just keeping her trapped? Or are we finally setting her free by trying to understand the real woman beneath the Roman myth?
It is a hell of a paradox. To remember her is to prolong her curse, but to forget her entirely is to let Octavian's lie win.
I think I am going to be thinking about that for a very long time.
Me too. It really stays with you.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into Cleopatra by Saara El-Arifi. It is a book that demands you look much closer at the stories you think you know.
Indeed. Look beneath the dirt and the soil.
See you next time.